Good morning. I hope everyone had a nice breakfast. My name is Robin Perry. I'm a local Long Beach attorney. And it's really my honor and privilege to introduce Professor Margaret Burnham. I, like so many other people, might not be here if it wasn't for people like Margaret Burnham, people who were from sort of a great generation of freedom fighters who won battles for people like me. Last night, I had a real treat. I got to have dinner with Miss Burnham, someone who was a lawyer who I had read so much about. I knew Professor Burnham had worked with Nelson Mandela, and I asked her, how did you come to meet Nelson Mandela? And Professor Burnham told me one day she was at home and her phone rang, and she answered. And on the other line, it's Nelson Mandela. Can you imagine the feeling? Wow. It really got me thinking, what if you missed that call? What if you just put it to voicemail, or what if you thought it was a telemarketer and you just hung up the phone? But Professor Burnham told me that she immediately recognized his voice. I pressed Professor Burnham a little and asked her, how did he know about you? How was he referred to you? And she said, not in a boastful way, but in a matter-of-fact way. He knew me by reputation. And by that time, Professor Burnham had quite a reputation. She had already defended and won the acquittal of civil rights activist and feminist scholar Angela Davis in the early 1970s. She had already become the first African-American female judge in Massachusetts. She was already practicing cutting-edge international human rights law in Boston. So you can understand why Nelson Mandela would call her when he needed expertise in forming a commission to investigate human rights abuses in South Africa. Her commission would be the precursor to South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission. But perhaps no work has been more important than what she's doing now. Professor Burnham founded the Civil Rights and Restorative Justice Project, a project that investigates and brings to light the unaddressed murders and disappearances of hundreds of Black men in the segregated South. Little was thought could actually be done about this until Professor Burnham's groundbreaking project. Now, why is this work vital today? You can't really understand the agony of the Trayvon Martin story unless you understand the anguish of cases like Emmett Till, a case of a 14-year-old boy murdered in Mississippi in the 1950s, his killers later acquitted in court, though they would later confess to committing the crime. Every case Professor Burnham unearths is a truth commission we really never had, and is a vital step as we continue to struggle with who we are as a people and how we can move forward together. After this short film, please give a warm welcome to a trailblazer, a hero, Professor Margaret Burnham.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, guys, you're taking from my time now. Thank you so much, and thank you, Robin, for that very, very kind introduction. I also told Robin that when President Mandela called me at my home, my kids were there and my husband was there, and of course they got all excited. One of the things he asked me, though, sort of to break the ice in the conversation, was he said to me, "How old are you?" And at that point I was 47 years old, and he said to me, "Oh, I'm 74 years old." And I was telling the story to the group of us who were having dinner last night, and one of the lawyers at the table said, he shouldn't be asking you how old you are. That's illegal. What a wonderful human being and a wonderful leader he was, and what a great honor it was to work with him and with the ANC. This is really just a beautiful occasion, and I'm so happy to be a part of it. And I want special thanks to Anne and to Jean Lensner for lending their support to this breakfast for a quarter of a century now, and to Dr. Mike and Arlene Walter for making the event possible and bringing us all here together, to Dr. Minnie Douglas, and to Wendy Nichols-Julian, and to Catherine Mikohami, I'm sorry I butchered that name, and to my new dear friend, Sunshine Day, for all the work they do to put CCEJ not only on the map here in Long Beach, but really all over the country. It's an amazing group of people, an amazing work that they've done for a long time now to keep in our national struggle for racial justice. So now, how did we, my organization, the Civil Rights and Restorative Justice Project, come to this work? Let me just give you a little bit of background. In 1964, in May of 1964, a bunch of divers in Mississippi found the dismembered lower body of a young man whose name was Charles Moore. And they pulled him from the river, the Mississippi River, south of Tallulah, Louisiana. His body was identified by the draft card that he had in his possession at the time of his death. And a few days later, they pulled out of the river another body. That was the body of Henry Hezekiah D. And he, too, was a completely dismembered, disarticulated body, and it took days before they pulled out the other half, the upper torsos of those bodies, and put them together and identified them as two men who had been kidnapped by the Klan and thrown into the river, one after the other, alive, in May of 1964. Now, my wager is that very few of you know about that case. It's not a case that was well known or became even part of our public consciousness until 2007, when the Justice Department finally prosecuted the Klansmen who had killed Charles Moore and Henry Hezekiah D. 2007, folks, that's not even 10 years ago. So this prosecution is part of a revival that has been going on for the last 20 years to revisit these cases and to figure out what measures of justice can actually be brought to bear to heal families and communities, and to render a full and comprehensive and truthful account of the past. These two young men were walking down the road in Meadville, Mississippi. They were snatched off the road. They were actually hitchhiking, and the two Klansmen picked them up, asked them about civil rights activity. The guy said they didn't know anything about any civil rights activity, and it was true, they didn't. And they were then locked up, beaten up, and with the full knowledge of the local police, the local sheriff, they were taken into the river and drowned. Now, the men who were responsible for that lived in Meadville until they died, until with respect to two of them, they were prosecuted in 2007. They lived right next door, right in the neighborhoods. One was a deacon of his church. The other raised his grandchildren in the very community where they had committed these murders. And as I say, no action was taken to bring justice to that family until this century. Now, I met the brother of Charles Moore. His name was Thomas Moore, and I met him at the criminal trial. And when I met him, I said to myself, and I heard the evidence in the case, I said, there's a civil case here because of the failure of the county to save the lives of these two boys, these two 19-year-old boys, when they had a chance to do so. And I brought that civil case on behalf of those families. And the elected officials in the town at that point were mostly African American. And they resisted, and they said, well, you have no right to tap into our tax dollars. We had nothing to do with what happened in 1964, but indeed they did, because corporate responsibility continues year after year, and all of us are responsible for what happened in 1964. Now, my client, Thomas Moore, is a bigger-than-life American. He's the brother of Charles Moore. He was born on July 4th, military man all his life. After his brother died, he went off to Vietnam, served his country, remained in the military, and now works on a military base in Colorado Springs. Now, when the books were closed on this case, when the criminal case was over and the civil case was over, and Thomas Moore's nightmares were tamped down, he went back to Meadville, his hometown, and he found one of the Klansmen who had participated in that killing. This man had turned state's evidence, so he didn't need to go to jail. And he went up to that man and he shook his hand. And he said, "We are both Americans. We are both Americans. This is our struggle, our battle." And he told the man that he had killed his brother and that he forgave him. Now, what Thomas Moore did is part of a broader movement that is going on, folks, all over our country, to redress, to understand the wrongs of the Jim Crow era. Michelle Alexander has taught us a lot about the new Jim Crow, and many of us are involved in actively understanding and dealing with the problems of the new Jim Crow. But we never will get anywhere with the new Jim Crow, as Robin said, unless we understand the old Jim Crow. Now, I want to just speak personally for a moment. This case, the Moore and Dee case, held special significance for me because when those two 19-year-old boys were killed in Mississippi, I was in Mississippi, and I was 19, and I was working as a civil rights lawyer, a civil rights activist, a student in the Mississippi movement, a few counties away from Franklin County where those boys died. And I knew nothing. None of us knew anything about the Dee and Moore case. Our focus was on Michael Schwerner, Andy Goodman, and James Chaney, those three civil rights workers who were my friends. And when they were lost, as did the nation and the world, we all focused on finding them and prosecuting their murderers. Bodies were pulled out of the river. And two of those bodies pulled out of the river were Dee and Moore. Photographs were taken, and the press said, this is not Chaney, Schwerner, and Goodman, because Schwerner and Goodman were white, and these are two black boys. Our project, and I'm not alone in this, I have colleagues all over the country, is about how many bodies are in the river. We don't know. We as Americans do not know. African Americans within our community, African American community, we say all the time, there are so many bodies in the river. We have the ability, the skills, and we must find the resources to name those people and to bring justice to their families and to their communities. That is our duty. That is our history. And if we don't do it, our children won't be able to do it because it will be lost. It will be lost history. Yesterday, I visited the Ernest McBride School, named after your own civil rights son, Ernest McBride. Now, Ernest McBride grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas. And one of the most searing and traumatic events in his life was the 1927 lynching of a man who rubbed too close to a white woman in Little Rock, and Ernest McBride remembered and watched as that man was lynched and then dragged through the streets of Little Rock. What do we know about the man who was killed? What do we know about his family? What do we know about the life he led? Precious little. Precious little. And yet these events sear the memory of us as individuals and us as collectives, as a collective African American community and as a collective American community. Let me share some notes from our files. We have 400 cases. Killed for going too slow on a dirt road, Malcolm Wright, 49, Houston, Mississippi, 1950. 1950. Killed for laughing, John Jackson, 21, Bessemer, Alabama, 1941. Killed for not saying yes, sir, Jesse Thornton, 26, Luverne, Alabama, 1940. Killed for not saying yes, sir, William Lockwood, Tuskegee, Alabama, 1946. Killed for sassing a white store clerk, Willie Daniel, 21, Westfield, Alabama, 1946. Killed for working for a black man instead of his white farmer, Eugene Bell, 24, Liberty, Mississippi, 1945. Killed for sitting in the wrong section of an interstate bus, Samuel Bacon, 51, Fayetteville, Mississippi, 1948. Killed for clenching his fist, Adam Green, 25, Dumas, Arkansas, 1945. Killed for sending a Christmas card to a white girl, Willie James Howard, 15 years old, Live Oak, Florida, 1940. On and on and on. Killed for registering to vote, Isaiah Nixon, 1948, Alston, Georgia. Killed for refusing to pick cotton cheap, Edward Green, the brother of Fred Shuttlesworth, Birmingham, Alabama's civil rights hero, 1943. 400 cases, I got you. 400 cases. What our work makes clear is that even today, as we struggle to find new ways of understanding violence, even as our young people are flooding the streets of our cities once again, demanding justice, even as we do this work, these past crimes lay unexplored, and we need to uncover them, to discover them, so we can fully understand what's going on in our country today. History calls for this work. Other countries do this work. Recently, I traveled to Berlin. As you walk down the streets of Berlin, your eyes are drawn to small metal plates, brass plates in the streets that mark the homes or businesses of those who perished in the Holocaust. You cannot walk a street in Berlin without remembering. And why did the artist choose this particular form? Because there was an old saying, if you stumble on a cobblestone, a Jew is buried there. And the artist turned that derogatory expression, metaphor, into memory. Individual memory. As you walk the streets, you will remember here that the Mendelssohns lived until 1943 or 42 or 41. And that they perished, or less likely, that they lived. If you go to the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin, as I did, you will see that there is an effort to recall each and every family and person who perished. 6 million is a big number. Read this book by Daniel Mendelsohn, folks, called The Lost, 6 of 6 million. These are his family members, 6 people who perished. He recovers their lives. That is happening all over, of all places, Germany. And it is our obligation as well. Robert Jackson, our Supreme Court Justice, who worked on the Nuremberg trials, once said, unless, and he was talking about the Holocaust, unless we write the record of this movement with clarity and precision, we cannot blame the future if in days of peace it finds incredible the accusatory generalities uttered during the war. We must establish incredible events by credible evidence. History requires it. Second, folks, our collective memory requires it. Knowledge about the past must be shared, mutually acknowledged by all communities affected, and reinforced by a collectivity. We must work in small groups and in organizations like this one, in circles, in formal organizations and in government settings to create a new history, revived and real and true and empowering history of our past. Now, what does this have to do with restorative justice, the project in which so many of us are now involved? Restorative justice aims, above all, to repair the harms caused by wrong and crime and violence. It tries to put in the center place the experiences and the needs, the material and emotional and moral needs of victims. This work does too. It insists on genuine accountability and responsibility from those who caused the harm. This work does too. It restores justice to the communities that were affected. And it says we are all, not just those of us with expertise, not just those of us with positions and names and business cards. We are all involved and must be involved in the duty, the responsibility, the business of producing justice. We all own that. We are all part of the same political project. We are all tied, whether we agree or disagree, to the community of fate. Our futures are tied. We share in the benefits, the marvelous bounty of our country, all of us, and its liabilities are those of all of us as well. I want to finish. I could go on, but my friend Sunshine has her cards there, and she's telling me my time is way past up. So I want to finish as I sometimes do. I can't sing. Don't get me started, I can't sing. But blind Lemon Jefferson, could sing. And this is what he sung in 1927. And I leave you with his words. One kind favor I ask of you. One kind favor I ask of you. One kind favor I ask of you. Please see that my grave is kept clean. Thank you very much.